And now we're joined by NFL Network draft analyst Daniel Jeremiah. You can find them on Twitter at Move the Sticks, also the host of the Move the Sticks podcast with Bucky Brooks. You can also find him on Pat to the Draft. It is required viewing for Draftniks every weeknight at 8 p.m. on NFL Network. Daniel, hope you and your family are holding up during these very, very odd times in our country.
Nah, we're doing good. I appreciate you asking. Hope everything's well on your end with your crew. It's crazy time we live in, but I cherish these moments where we can, get a little bit of an escape and talk some sports.
Let's start with the Giants at number 4. If you look at your top 50 board, which you can find on NFL.com, you kind of have those 3 defensive players, Simmons, Derek Brown, and Jeffrey Okudah in the top 5 of your big board. Let's start here. How much separation do you have just in terms of raw grade between those guys and the top offensive tackle prospects?
Well, there's not much because when I have Mekhi Becton is right there. When you look at Okudah as my 5th player, Mekhi Becton, the big tackle from Louisville, comes in as my 7th player. So it's pretty close there. I think you just kind of come down to where the need is and what positions that you value. I have Isaiah Simmons all the way up there. Now, some folks will say, we don't value the off-the-ball linebacker, or hybrid player maybe as much as some other teams do. But having a chance to call the Charger games and see Derwin James and his versatility, what that does, what allows you to do against some of these offenses that you play against, that's why I'm pretty bullish on him and a big fan of his game. But to answer your question, I don't think there's a tremendous gap there between those guys and Becton. And I would even say, for me, Jedrick Wills is the 2nd tackle. I think all those guys are right there together. Yeah,
I'll dive into the offensive tackles in a second. But you mentioned position value. And because Simmons is so versatile, he's not your normal inside linebacker. He's going to be a 3-down player. He can cover guys in the slot, play deep safety, do a million different things. Does that close the gap a little bit when you talk about position value between that inside linebacker spot where, you look at the transition tags, it's a lot lower than those, top offensive tackles?
Yeah, I think it does make a difference when you talk about somebody that can play all those different spots like Simmons can. When you're comparing him to other defensive players and premier positions, when you're talking about edge rusher, corner, corner is going to be more valued by most teams than a linebacker. But I think this kid's not just a linebacker; it's all the different things he can do that separates him from the bunch. But you look on the other side of it, and then it's okay. And we'll get into this, but talking about the offensive tackle position, you can say the need is greater on defense, but the ultimate quest for this team is to see Daniel Jones continue to grow, develop, and take that next step. And so that's when I come down on this saying, okay, I might have higher grades on these defensive players, but where is our focus? Where's our priority? And to me, it has to start with helping this kid really be successful.
Yeah, and you kind of took me exactly where I was going to go, Daniel. From a team-building perspective, you draft a quarterback last year. You have a running back in Saquon Barkley. Yep. You want to protect your quarterback. You have Nate Solder, just 2 years left on his contract, over 30 years old. Right now, you have a competition, a right tackle between Cameron Fleming, a free agent addition, and Nick Gates, an undrafted guy from a couple years ago. Yeah. So when you're trying to build a team, does that trump some of the overall great stuff that we've talked about already?
I think so. I think finding the quarterback is number 1, and then building an environment that can help him grow and flourish is number 2. That's the team's going to go as far as he's going to take him. And Daniel Jones is not the best football player on the Giants team right now. Everybody would say they would have Saquon Barkley there. But what you can do for him to grow and to secure the status as being this franchise quarterback, that's the most important thing. So if we look at this Giants roster right now, and from somebody on the outside, I would say, okay, everything goes well. A great turnaround would be an 8 or 9 win season. Well, what do you want that to look like? To me, I would rather have that 8 or 9 season come in some games. Maybe you lose some shootout games, but your quarterback is protected and his confidence is growing and you're starting to see him really flourish. I'd rather have those 8 or 9 wins come in that fashion than winning every game 10-7. And now I've got a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of confidence and you don't know, is he really the guy? Do we need to go get another one? That to me is the way I would go, is I would load up around him.
Now, you're someone that obviously was in the Ravens front office for a while. Do you look at the 2 positions and think about how scarce offensive tackles have been, not only in these drafts, but in free agency too? Look, Jack Conklin was a free agent, but only because they didn't pick up the 5th-year option because of an injury, right? These guys just don't become available. So how much of this you have to strike when the iron's hot, when you get the rare draft class, when you get this many guys that are actually available when you pick?
Well, I think it's a great point. And I talk to college coaches all the time. And I was talking to one a couple months ago. He brought up a great point. He said, we are looking for a graduate transfer offensive tackle. And the way the college game works now, these kids go into this transfer portal and then they're available. He said, these kids go into the transfer portal, they're committed to another team within 2 hours of entering the transfer portal because we're all trying to find offensive tackles. Well, it's the same in the NFL. I go through every team and you're trying to get ready for the draft and, okay, what do they need? And you'd be amazed. Every team, almost every team, they need an offensive tackle and a corner. I mean, it's like across the board. Like those needs are not going away. And when you're in a position to solve one of those, and the difference between a corner and a tackle is if you get a quality tackle, that might be a 14 or 15-year guy that's going to play and nail down that spot. A corner, you're not going to have quite as long a shelf life there because of the reliance on the athleticism. But, man, it's a great need to check off and not have to worry about it anymore.
All right, potential to trade down since there are those three, depending on how you think about Andrew Thomas, 4 top tackles in this class. If the Giants want to trade down, you need a dance partner to do this, right? Yeah. Do you think there will be a team that is looking to trade up at 4? Do you think the Lions are going to make that move ahead of the Giants, which might limit the Giants' options? How do you see that trade market develop this year with the quarterbacks that could go ahead of the Giants?
Well, I think it depends on what happens in front. I think if Detroit wants to move, I would imagine they would more than likely have an opportunity to do that. If they don't have an opportunity to move, I would find it odd that the Giants would, because the people move up for quarterbacks. I mean, that's more than likely what you're moving up for. And that to me would be a battle between 5 and 6 with Miami and the Chargers to try and get up for, assume it's Tua, but it could be Herbert, whoever they like at the position. But if I'm in their shoes, I'm placing the call to the first available opportunity that I have. We assume Washington will take Chase Young. So if that happens, then the first opportunity to move up for your quarterback is at 3. So look, Dave Gettleman, nobody would love it more than me to see that for the first time, to see him take the plunge and trade back just so we have something to talk about on the TV broadcast. But I don't know that he's going to get the opportunity to do so.
You have Cesar Ruiz in your top 30. Let's get to the Giants pick at 36. Is he the only center that you think is worth a top 50 pick in that draft where the Giants might consider at 36?
Well, I like Lloyd Cushenberry too. I would put him in there. Both those guys are in my top 50 on my player list. And Cushenberry, a little bit better athlete, I think, than Ruiz. He's got a little bit better bend and balance. Ruiz is a little more, he's stronger, a little more physical, can do everything. So I have Ruiz as the top guy. But I think Lloyd Cushenberry is very much deserving of being a top 50 pick. And I don't think that would be a reach at all there in the second round.
We talk about offensive tackles having a lot of value. Obviously, then edge rushers do too, right? Those guys go up against each other trying to disrupt the pass game. This is a bit of a scarce class in terms of edge rushers, Daniel. So after Chase Young, is this going to be a deal where the scarcity drives the price up on these guys a little bit, where it's going to tough to find value for the Giants at 36 and 99 at that spot?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. I'm curious to see when the next guy goes off the board, because when I just grade them purely as players, Chase Young's my top guy, and then you start getting to me like Caleb Chason from LSU is like my 25th player, somewhere around that range. AJ Epinesa is in that ballpark. I think though, because there just aren't edge rushers, you're going to see so many teams need one. You're going to see those guys get elevated, and they're going to get picked a little bit higher than maybe they should. And then I'm curious to see, is that a trickle-down effect? You get to guys like, Darrell Taylor from Tennessee, who you think is going to be a third-round pick. Julian Okwara from Notre Dame, to me, is more of a third-round type player, late second-round type of player. I won't be surprised you see these guys shoot up the board just because we don't really have any. It's going to be fascinating to see if teams stick to their grades or if they get a little more need-based and say, hey, we've got to get an edge rusher. We got to push this kid up.
How do you see Zach Bond out of Wisconsin? Because you watch him on tape, I think he's an excellent edge rusher, but he's like 230 pounds. So can you play him there every down? Is he a guy that maybe you play as an inside guy in a 3-4 on downs 1 and 2 and rush him on third down? Is he a guy that can drop into coverage? How do you view him as a player? Because I think that could be a sweet spot if he's sitting there at 36.
Yeah, I think he's a really good player. And look, he does not have the ideal size that you'd want to be able to hold up on the edge on an every down basis. But he's shown he's athletic enough. He can play off the ball. In a 3-4 playing inside, that will be an adjustment for him. But, I was in Baltimore. We had a guy named Jarrett Johnson went from a defensive tackle to defensive end to outside linebacker to inside linebacker. So I've seen it be done before when somebody has instincts to be able to play off the ball and grow into that role. But I just know when you get past situations, I don't care if he's undersized or not. I'm going to let him rush off the edge and give some people some fits.
Daniel, someone that's been in the draft room and been in the draft meetings with these teams that are going on right now, how is this situation in self-isolation affecting not only the preparation for the draft right now, but then when you get to draft day, how is this new technological world they're going to be conducting the draft with going to change how things go?
Well, I've used the phrase, it's a popular one, right? Where you want to measure twice and cut once. I think the importance on your preparation coming into the event has never been more important. And a great example of that is, I think, you ought to scrimmage out every possible conceivable trade you could make in the first round and have those conversations with teams. Hey, look, we're not going to say players, but for the Giants at 4, if you want to move at 2, if you're not happy with who's there and we potentially want to move up, let's get the framework of what that would look like. Conversely, hey, if you call the teams picking 10 spots up to 10 spots behind you, if you wanted to move up, this is kind of what we'd be looking for. So when you're on the clock and you get a phone call, you're not having to start from scratch, because that's going to be difficult to coordinate with all the different parties in that amount of time. So again, I think the importance of the preparation, that's going to be huge.
And then how is the undrafted free agent process going to go? Because we know that is just a fire drill. Once you get there, a million different people on the phone. How do you think that's going to work, trying to get those guys locked up once you get past day 3?
Well, I think what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to give autonomy to different folks. So, the way the teams I was with, we did it, you pair up a scout and a coach. And then once you got players, you'd get a list and say, okay, I had running backs when I was with the Eagles. So it'd be me and Deuce Staley, who was the running backs coach. They would say, we can sign 2 running backs. You have a budget of signing bonus budget of $10,000 or whatever. So we had our list of guys. We would call, kind of the late round free agent type players the week of the draft, start recruiting them then. And then we would, once the draft ends, boom, you're together with him on a Zoom conference with you and the coach, and you're trying to get agents and players either on that, or you're calling them on a cell phone, but you're trying to get that contact done and then really just kind of work down the list. But in the past, we would always come back to the draft room and kind of consult and say, okay, they might say, well, we ended up giving this offensive tackle $5,000 more than we wanted to, so we got to take that from another position. Like, no, you're going to have a strict budget, and you're going to have to be, disciplined and organized and say, okay, we got to get 4 offensive linemen. This is what we're working with. Those 2 guys need to go solve that problem and then bring us back the names, and we'll get the contracts done.
Final one, Daniel, rapid fire. If you were the GM of the Giants, who's your pick it for, assuming that Chase Young is off the board and let's say 2 of the quarterbacks?
I would take Mekhi Becton. I would, from Louisville, and I'd let him play right tackle. He's played on both sides. I'd let him play right tackle initially. I think he'd be my long-term left tackle when it's all said and done. But I'm going to protect my quarterback. So that would be my first option there for them.
Really good stuff, man. We appreciate the time. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Yeah, all the best. Be safe too.
Hey Giants fans, Saquon Barkley here. You want to see more videos? Subscribe below.